forget, we are going to. So anybody that is a co-host or something, it might ask you if this is okay. Just hit yes if it has a note on your screen, because we are recording. And so let's see, let's let in Barb. Other than that, it is 6 o'clock. And let's spotlight our brand new president for everyone. Yay!
Congratulations and thank you.
Congratulations and thank you.
Yes.
Yes. Well, I hope this is an exciting new year for us, and that we can enjoy together some of the wonderful speakers that Rochelle and Hannah have been bringing to us through the year. There was an idea that the board has been kicking around. I know that there are people in kind of isolated areas where maybe they don't have bead stores or bead groups handy. So we were thinking about the idea of kind of spurring small bead groups that
something happened there.
Would meet via Zoom or whatever else you have available.
In the middle of this
and if there's any interest, put it into chat to you know, to make us aware. And we're going to be sending out a survey later on to, you know, but you know, if you have some interest, let us know and we'll see what we can do about getting you together. So I think that's all I've got, Rochelle. Back to you.
Thank you.
Okay, you did freeze up on there for part of a minute. So but
okay,
we were talking about small Zoom bead groups.
Right. Yes. Yes. And if you have an interest, in being part of that, let us know. Put it into the chat, and we'll be doing a survey later on. But we're just kind of gauging interest if that's something that we want to work on.
Sounds good. Sounds super. Do we have any other announcements? Becky, let me get you spotlight. There we go.
I would just like to remind people that for most of you, your dues are ended the end of December. And I want to thank everybody that has renewed. And if you have not, please remember to do that. Thank you.
I mailed a check in and I didn't receive an email yet with a copy of my membership card to print off.
Oh, okay. We don't check the mailbox very often because it's kind of inconvenient, but as soon as we get it, I will get your card to you.
Okay, I mean, I'll you can use it now until next spring anyway. I was just bringing that up.
But yeah, we're asked, most people pay on PayPal now. We do still accept checks, and if you don't have PayPal, you can email me at bpancakebeads@gmail.com. And I can send a request, and even if you don't have PayPal, you can still pay that way.
You can pay with a credit card then, right, Becky?
Right.
Becky, can you give me that PayPal or that email again, and I'll put it in the chat?
b.pancakebeads@gmail.com.
Let me know if that's right.
Correct.
Super. All right. So it's
Thank you.
If I could just note, what happens is if you send in a check, it goes to our PO box, which is at the Textile Center. The Textile Center has very limited hours that it's available, so it's hard to pick up the money there. So we really prefer if you either use PayPal, or if you can't use PayPal, we can invoice you and you can pay with a credit card.
But yeah, if you do send a check, just let us know so that we can make sure Nanita or whoever goes over there knows that it's there. So we know you paid and you won't, you'll always be getting your thing. It'll just take longer.
Okay. I was just having a problem with I have a PayPal account, but they were asking me so many personal questions. I just decided I would mail it, not thinking
No worries.
how inconvenient that would be for you. So I won't do that next year.
It just didn't used to be this inconvenient. It's gotten worse over the years. And so,
Yeah.
And PayPal allows, even if you don't have a PayPal account, the invoices allow you to go ahead and not log in, but instead click the link and then put in any credit card. And so you can pay using any credit card without going through all of the questions and answers and hassle of going ahead and making an account
Okay,
for next time.
that's right.
and so Hannah, do we want to announce our Let's Be Live that's happening on the 21st? A small announcement about that?
Let's do it. It'll be fun. So there are going to be two things happening on the 21st, and you are invited to all of them. The first thing that's going to happen is I am going to interview Rochelle, because she has been creating the colors for the just Gesundheit for the Toho since 2016. So I thought it would be fun to interview her so that you guys could go ahead and see her process and listen to how she gets inspired to create a beading palette and a palette of colors. And we'll talk about all her past ones, and we'll also give you a beautiful little teaser shot of this year's colors and let you know when you can start and how to get, oh, she's doing a little teaser shot right now. And when you can start and how to get involved, even if you're not a featured artist. There are a number of featured artists, but you don't have to be a featured artist in order to get involved. I've gotten involved every year for the past 9 years. I've done it. And Doris, how many have you done? You've done a whole bunch of them too, haven't you? I think I saw Doris here.
Yeah, at least half of them.
Yeah. So you can get involved anyway, and we'll give you the rules, and we'll so she will tell us how she gets inspired for these beautiful palettes. And then my mom and I will take over from there. I'm going to be in Chicago with my mom. My mom was one of the founding members of the Textile Center of the Weavers Guild, not the Textile Center, of the Minnesota Weavers Guild. We lived there until I was 13. And Mom and I will talk about color theory and how it relates to both beads and what my mom does, which is she's a weaver. So that's what we're doing on the 21st.
Yeah. So there's no kits to be had yet to your supply list. You just get to sit down and enjoy and hopefully be inspired to then start beading after that.
Right, exactly. Mom and I will talk about some of the colorways that sell the best for us, and some of the ones that are kind of just kind of problematic to sell, even though some of them are my very favorite colors. And then I think it's just going to be really fun. Afterwards, I've made a little color theory slideshow on PowerPoint, and I think afterwards we'll go ahead and we can upload it into the members only section. So I think we have a new person doing the website, and so Janet, if you show her how to access the members only part and upload to that, that would be super.
I have a question. Kind of had to walk out of the room for a minute. On the 21st, how do we find out about what's going on the 21st? Was that sent out in an email or something? I missed it.
The event tomorrow, and I'll put it on both the Facebook page and the Facebook group.
Otherwise, right now it's on the UMBS calendar page, so you can see all the information if you go to the website, the regular calendar page.
I'll go ahead and put a link in.
And something you said is tomorrow. I thought you originally it was on the 21st.
No,
Tomorrow she'll make a Facebook event.
Okay, yeah. I'll have to go look on that. And I have one question. I thought I had paid my dues but I'm not 100% sure. If somebody could check and let me know. I paid somebody, but I don't know which one. I've got like 3.
Okay, I don't know who's asking this. What's your name?
Veda,
Okay,
VADA,
I'll check.
RAP, RAPP.
Thanks, I'll check.
Thank you.
I have a question. Are you supposed to get a membership card?
Yes.
Because I've never got one. My dues were automatically paid in August.
And what is your name?
Joanne Goldberg.
Okay.
Usually you get emailed one.
I didn't get anything.
Yeah, I've never gotten anything in the past.
This is Barb. I try to remember to email people their membership card. If they live in Australia, I don't generally do that, but if they live around here, I sure do. So I think that this has been a perennial problem of people not, whatever, either possibly me forgetting, but also it just getting kind of lost in the spam or something. I don't know. So yeah, you can let me or Becky Pancake know, and we'll make sure to get you your card sent out.
Sounds good. Any other announcements?
Rochelle, just a quick one. The About Us page on the UMBS website has links to all of the board of directors. So if you've got a question, for instance, for membership, use that link. You know, you can do that anytime, and it sends an email directly to that member. Okay, sorry, Rochelle.
No, I forgot about the About Us page with all of our direct stuff there. So that's, and it says who's who as well, membership or accounting or or whatever. Anybody else announcement?
This is Roberta Sorensen, and I am in charge of retreats, and our spring retreat is coming up March 29th, which is a Wednesday, through Sunday, April 2nd. And you can go for the entire time or just one day. I'll be putting the registration information on our website very soon. Something new this year is that we will no longer have COVID protocols. The camp where we go and the UMBS Society will no longer ask for proof of vaccination or a liability waiver. And Diane Fitzgerald has said that she's very interested in teaching a class maybe on brick stitch at retreat this year. We don't know which day it will be yet. That's still to be determined. That's my little blurb.
Thank you. Super. Well, if there is no more, we have a really exciting program for you tonight. We have amazing bead sculptural artist with us, Elfleda Russell. She has been a wonderful champion for our Toho challenges the last couple years. So you might have seen her work already out there on some of our Facebook posts and things. And so we're really excited for her to tell you everything she knows about so many things. So just get your tea ready and sit back and enjoy. So Elfleda, take it away.
Thanks, Rochelle.
Okay, just a second here.
And thanks to all of you for inviting me to talk to you. My assistant here has to do all the technical stuff. I'm an absolute moron on the computer.
No comment.
So you don't have to look just at me anymore.
Okay, you're on.
So, my presentation is going to focus mainly on the 2 challenge pieces, but I'm going to also show my work in prior media and a little about my background because I think our experiences in life are most useful source for ideas. And I'm going to kind of illustrate that through the slides as we go along. The picture on the left is from several years ago, about I guess I've been beading for over 20 years. And this was taken, I don't know, 5 years after I started beading, maybe a bit more. I do have a website, which I encourage you all to go and Google. It's just artofElfledarussell.com. And some of the pieces I'm going to show you now are from the website, but the website was created a good 5 or 6 years ago, so none of my recent work is on it. We're going to be updating it soon. So let's see, I did it right. Okay. So these are the two pieces. Are we able to reduce the band at the right? Because it's cutting my image off. Can you see that?
Your images are perfectly clear, Elfleda. I think it's just on your computer.
Oh, it's only on mine. Okay. But if we can just keep the top in, there we go. Or plus Rochelle.
Yeah, can somebody tell me how to get the video of people moved? Because I'm only seeing part of her screen.
Are you on view? Are you on speaker view? Or are you on gallery view?
I must be on gallery.
So
One
put
time.
it on speaker view. Because you should see Elfleda's presentation and then Elfleda's face on one side, and that's all you should see.
So just show active speaker video. Is that what you're saying?
It sounds like it.
Okay, I think I got it. If I could just move it somewhere. There we go. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Okay. Should I continue?
Yeah,
Okay, so these are my two challenge pieces. The one on the left from 21 is beading is done onto underlying forms in many cases, be they styrofoam domes and wooden beads and a variety of supporting structures. I'm going to show you that as we go along. It uses wire, etc. The 22 piece is mainly made with beads only, and it's a bas-relief panel, which I came to realize this is really me doing wall pieces, and you're about to see why. All my work leading up to beading was, almost all of it was wall pieces. Even at a glance, there's something I want you to notice about these two pieces. In the 22 piece, the main elements stand out quite well. The background elements have a subdued quality that allows them to recede. This is because I discovered beaded pointillism when I was doing that piece. And I felt in the 21 piece that the background, if I had thought of a way then to subdue the background elements, I would have, but I didn't think of it until the 22 piece. So I invented beaded pointillism, where all the beaded areas in the background especially are a combination of at least 2 beads of different colors. And those of you who have art history know that Seurat invented it for his paintings, putting dots of color that your eye would mix. So I hope you can see how in ripples, the foreground elements, the corals, the limpets, the sea star and the seahorse stand out quite clearly. And that's a result of pointillism. So we're going to go through my own background and the variety of media I've worked in. This is our summer place on the water. We just finished rebuilding it. It was a little wooden shack that you could see through, and we had an outhouse for 50 years. So this isn't, this isn't us as much as the little shack was us. I'm on the right-hand side, down on the patio by the water. The water rises up that seawall. At low tide, it's a rocky beach exposed. And on those rocks, there used to be an army of sea stars. They all disappeared 5 years ago, which was horrifying. We'd been starting to hear about climate change, but at that point it became very real, very personal, very urgent. I started beading sea stars, thinking, my gosh, if they're not on our rocks anymore, they're going to be on our walls at least. So I began experimenting, and these are the results of some of those experiments. These are mostly made with Acos and other novelty, either number 8 or cubes added. And on the middle one, there are some larger E-beads that are Muki E-beads, if I'm allowed to say that. Prior to beading, I did painting and weaving. So Hannah's mother should be here in a minute because I'm going to show some weavings. My painting evolved into a lot of portrait commissions. I guess I did about 100. At one point I did a painting of my husband by the water, and after that, everyone wanted their portraits at the water. Painting a group of people makes me think of the things I had to think about when I was beading ripples. It's a grouping, and yet each person in that group has its own personality, and yet it has to all work as a whole. This is a large painting, 30 by 40. And I want you to notice a few little things. There are things, kind of overriding things that I think about no matter what medium I'm working in. And I'm going to list them for you because I'd love you to keep this in your mind as we go through the different images. One of the overriding things is repetition with variation. Here, it's obvious they're all wearing the same jacket, but look how the windows of the sailboat pick up the colors in the background and even the color of the jacket and pants. So there's a repetition in color, but also in shapes. I think about progression, that some things become stronger while others are more subdued. I think about interplay between the foreground and the background. So things that happen in main objects can be repeated into the background so that they become locked together. It's like a big dance, I always think in my mind. And finally, I want my work to be expressive, no matter the medium. I want my beading to be seen as an expressive art form. Here I have 4 individuals, different expressions, different personalities. I'm trying to make the invisible person also visible. In beading, I want the beads themselves and the way I bead to contribute to the expressive quality of the beading. 2 more portrait commissions. On the left, she's a talented figure skater. I wanted you to feel her how graceful she is. She bought this dress especially for the painting at my urging. I wanted something that flowed and would show movement. I look back now and realize I was painting transparent fabric in that portrait. Now I work with transparent beads. And in pointillism, the matte transparent beads became very, very important in mixing the colors. It's almost like her arms are a burgundy thread going through that transparent sleeve. On the right, little Marshall Hobbs sitting by a tidal pool. This is the first time I engaged directly with sea stars, barnacles, seaweed, and of course, again, the water. By the way, back at Penny Siller's portrait on the left, look how the ripples in the water bring your eye up and down the background towards the foreground. In my mind, I see a connection with the seahorse and the ripples in the water behind him, a vertical dominant element and a series of arched ripples forming the water behind. I had no idea about this relationship with ripples until this morning. It sort of caught my eye. I could have picked several self-portraits, but I chose this one to show you. I was very young. I wasn't yet married. It's oil pastel and turpentine. It's a bit surrealistic, a bit abstracted. And I was so shocked when I recently received a photo. The piece was purchased right when I did it and moved down to California before I photographed it. Now I got a photo up at my request, and it makes me think again so much of ripples, the rounded sea corals, and it almost looks like I'm swimming underwater, which I did a lot of. I did a lot of swimming, period. This is the portrait of Alan that caused a lot of people to want their portraits by the water. He was a little younger then. His beard was mostly black. What's important is in this painting is how the waves in the water break up the reflection into little fractured pieces. In ripples, I'm going to point out the beaded frame comes directly from the experience of painting that, the broken up reflection caused by the waves. This is an abstract painting, and I did a lot of abstract work early in my life. It was a way of isolating out the expressive qualities I really wanted in the work. It's called Warrior. It's really the creative woman as a warrior, her battles with her inner struggles to find her creative voice, and her battle with society's expectations. So I think creative women are really true heroes. Okay, Hannah, I wish your mom was here because she would understand what's going on here. Maybe some of you have woven. I hope so. This is an upright tapestry done in I call it our Boston period. We lived in Boston for 4 years, and I had started textiles and weaving just before we left. And Alan was doing his PhD at MIT. We were living in a tiny student residence. And when we got there, I saw an announcement about a textile exhibition in this Boston City Hall. And I thought, hey, this is my chance to sort of introduce my work to the Boston scene. Alan you need to build me a loom and a spinning wheel. He did. And I was in that exhibition, and it made for a very exciting period of time in Boston, because I kept getting invitations to exhibit and requests to teach as well. After a while, and there's many, many pieces in between these, this is a card woven tapestry, large. Those are both 8 feet high, the last and this. This one's about 4 feet wide. Hundreds of cards are used. Card weaving is where it's almost like taking a loom apart, and you can move the workings of the loom around. And I'll show you a picture in a minute of it happening. But you have automatic weaving, but the freedom of off loom. Here is some card weaving in process. Poor old Alan had to build another loom. This is just a big peg frame that I use for card weaving. It's about 8 feet high, 4 feet wide. These pieces are called courants, which in French means streams. By now, we're back in Boston and in Montreal. And this right-hand piece was being done for a large exhibition. You can see how bands of card weaving in the top areas have been made separately, sewn together, and then the interweaving card weaving commences. The bands of card weaving can alternate between being warps and wefts. This solidifies the importance of organic movement in all my work, because I went to great lengths to accomplish it, and found it very, very satisfying. This is a tiny miniature card weaving, 14 inches in each direction. It's inspired by felted samurai armor. If you've ever seen any Japanese armor from the Middle Ages, it's absolutely fabulous. I saw 6 sets in the Tower of London, and each one had its own color scheme. So I've now found a way to work completely 3-dimensionally in card weaving. It does foreshadow my beading both in scale and in goals. You can see the organic movement is still there. I want you to feel that this tiny seated figure has great power, because I was thinking of the samurai warrior that isn't here anymore. All that time I was teaching, I was documenting what I was doing, because with every piece I do, I try to explore some new element, some new shaping technique that I'm inventing myself. And I have to make notes or I'd forget it all. And so it's natural that I would be teaching from my notes as well. But the art critic of the Boston Globe came to me one day after he featured the Boston Globe. He featured my work periodically, and he was asked to find authors for some craft books. He asked me to write the weaving book. I did, and it sold out, but it's still available on Zoom. This is a beaded teapot. I was asked to do one for the Mobilia Gallery in Boston. It's obviously called the Garden of Eden teapot. You can see Eve on this side having a cup of tea, and the apple and the snake. I used plastic tubing and wire and casting material to make the snake. The pot itself was cast from a real teapot. And in a minute, I'm going to show you the casting and modeling materials that I use. Around the foot is a bead woven text that says, if only they'd chosen tea instead. So there's loom bead weaving here, peyote, but the big deal to me is that I discovered brick stitch is the most flexible stitch that I've ever tried. And I use it all the time. Now I use it, the entire 2 challenge pieces are all brick stitch. Here I used it in the background because that's where the beading was being shaped to fit onto the pot as it was being worked. Here's the Adam side. The lid has been removed. When you look down inside, there's beaded tea inside and a floating tea bag and a label that comes out that unfortunately you can't see it. It's behind the pot. I think I've told you all the things to say about that. We'll move on. This next teapot, also done for the Mobilia Gallery, is called Homage to Chagall. About 13 years ago, I had a major health issue, which required treatments for a period of time. When I came back from that very successfully, I found my creative urges had sort of left me. And I thought, gee, will I ever get ideas again? Because they used to just flow from one thing to another to another. So I went to my library of art books and started looking up my favorite artists, Paul Klee, Kandinsky, came to Chagall, and he's a painter whose whimsical, happy, cheerful works were painted despite great difficulties in his life. He had to flee his small town in Russia, and he moved to Paris to be with other painters. And yet he continued to produce his wonderful art. And I thought, gosh, I should be able to do that too. So this was the first beading where I tried to be really expressive, because in a painting he did of his studio, he included a cat sitting at the window, looking out, looking very melancholy. I decided I'm going to do my interpretation of Chagall's melancholy cat on my lid. I had to make him 3-dimensional. I had to design him so that he went with my work. So it's very different from Chagall's cat, but I think it has accomplished expressing the melancholy mood. So again, brick stitch in the background, bead weaving in the foot, which says, Chagall and friends come to tea. On the other side, you see Chagall and I having a cup of tea together, and the other side of the creatures. Each creature took, I would say, weeks. They were almost as much work as the whole pot itself. Oh, a really important thing to say. The horns of the goat, there's my goat, Hannah. He painted goats in all his paintings, so I have to give Chagall full credit. But I love goats, and I had to include it. The horns are curved by using smaller beads on one side of the herringbone chain and larger beads on the other. So each horn is a herringbone chain. It can't do anything except curve, and it has no wire needed. This technique occurs again and again in my beading. Take the lid off and look inside. There's the beaded tea, the tea bag, and doggone, we can't see the label. I got such a kick out of labeling the teas. I called this Bella tea because Chagall, his wife's name was Bella, and he loved her dearly. The top of the teapot is just abstract beading. It kind of harks back to my Warrior series. It's just sheer movement and joy, and a lot of fun to do. A very important aspect of my beading is how I do design each element. And this shows it. This makes me think of Seinfeld, the comedy TV show about nothing. This is about nothing, but it is something. This is the sculpting and modeling material I use. Top left is plaster impregnated gauze. You put your finger into a bowl of water and just tap it onto the strips that you lay onto the form you're making a cast of. And as you rub it back and forth, the plaster becomes a paste, and it makes your woven gauze become a solid piece of plaster. I usually do about 3 layers of overlapping strips when I'm casting something, and you can cast anything. Just put tape and Vaseline over what you're casting, and it won't hurt it. In Vanishing World, there's a lot of wooden beads underlying what I do. I used styrofoam domes. Some are hollow, some I had to make hollow. In the top, you see a bag of modeling compound, which is powder. You add water and stir, and it makes a thick modeling paste, almost like clay. And I've used it to make the animals in the Chagall pot, and the features in a lot of beaded masks that I made at the early on in my beading, right at the beginning, actually. Here I've combined card weaving and beading in the headpiece of Memory Mask. I'm really making the point that we grow and create from synthesizing our own experiences. The face was cast onto a wig form. You can put your face behind the mask if you wanted to. There's modeling of the features were done with that modeling compound I just showed you. Strips of bead weaving alternate with strips of card weaving in the headpiece. The headpiece simply started from a cutout shape of corrugated cardboard. By the time I added my plaster layers on the front and back, joining it in the process to my mask, it was very strong and solid. On the right, you see the talking stick that hangs below. Indigenous peoples, often as they sit around the fire, would pass a talking stick from person to person. The person holding the stick was empowered to speak. Everyone had to stop and listen. I'm again speaking about the creative woman gaining her power from her own experiences. So I've given her her own talking stick. This is Janus for the Toucans, another mask. Janus, as some of you will know, is a Greek and Roman god who protects the home, often depicted in double profile. He could see danger coming from all directions. I'm asking Janus to protect the jungle habitat that is being lost so rapidly to coffee plantations. His own faces are, the features are composed of the flora and fauna from the jungle, the plants, the flowers, the fishes in the streams and rivers, and the headpiece is the sun shining down through the jungle foliage with the two toucans in between. This is called Across the Bay, and this comes straight from our summer place in a way. We look across at a low mountain, and the bay is all full of boats coming and going. I used to swim across and back. It's about a mile and a bit. I was a really keen swimmer. The feel of water washing over your body, I just love that sensation. This was done shortly after 9/11. I did it for Convergence 2002, which Hannah's mom might know about Convergence because it's a big international group.
Oh, she used to go every year.
What?
She used to go every year.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Oh, I could have run into her because, well, Convergence 2002 was held in Vancouver.
Right. She used to go here, and she would have been. I'm gonna have to show some of these photos of your work to her. She's gonna be so excited.
Oh, thank you. I hope you do, and tell me what she says. So at Convergence 2002, this got first prize in its category. There were about, I would say, 6 categories. There were probably over 1,000 works exhibited at the conference. So you can see the band of card weaving across the bottom. It incorporates some of my inventions I won't go into, but I tried to make it a game. Can you tell where the beading starts and the weaving ends? And the foreground also is beaded. I wove first and had to make the beading seem a convincing depiction of landscape that would cause those reflections. So Rebirth neck piece, I felt a bit reborn after my big health scare, and I'm very lucky. I'm just fine now. There are multiple shaping techniques used here. It includes miters at the corners that shapes a thick round chain so that it can turn a 90-degree angle. And if you simply stop 2 pieces of beading on a 45-degree angle and join them, your work will turn a 90-degree angle. Arching by fanning, that arch is made by using smaller beads to the inside, bigger beads to the outside. And also the chain arches itself to form the inner part of that fan. Also, it has smaller beads to the inside of the arch, larger beads to the outside. The herringbone ruffle that goes down the center sort of speaks for itself. It's a long piece of ruffle that folds up in half. I wanted the lower part to feel like a seed breaking open and life coming forth. The base area, the big triangle, the V shape, is made by folding a big piece of beading over, and it's made in herringbone. I hope the petal shape, the red sort of head shape, top center. I call it a petal shape, and it's going to come up again and again in my jewelry pieces coming up. I call this piece Africa. I call a whole series of necklaces I did that work from a very fat, strong chain across the top. I call that a sling, and it gave me kind of a stage from which I could build a statement piece of jewelry. Because it's all, how are you going to get big? You can make 10,000 of the same thing and put them all together, but I didn't want to do that. So the ruffle is just a long piece of ruffle that I hung from the corners, and then I worked in peyote from the chain down, filling in all the crevices and the openings in the ruffle. So this relates in a lot of ways to my woven tapestry in my own mind. I call it Africa because of the beautiful African beads and big chunks of turquoise. These are two of a whole slew of chrysanthemum necklaces I made. This is herringbone ruffle stitched into a spiral to form a ball, and they're highly textural and a very solid mounded ball. And you can make it as big as you want, and you can put as much variation into it as you want. The piece on the right, obviously, I was working with multiple colors, and it starts from the good old sling necklace concept again. I also did a whole slew of beaded shoulder purses. If you don't see a shoulder chain in the series coming up, it's just tucked inside. They all have a long chain. They can be worn cross-body. They can be worn as a necklace. They can be a functioning purse. Herringbone done in the round makes it grow very quickly. I gave so many workshops on these, and everyone was doing a different one of my designs. The one on the left is called Peacock. It just has a flap that hangs down, kind of a peacock shape, and it has a fringe, whereas the one on the right is all herringbone with a skirt at the bottom that expands by adding the spacers to flare the skirt out, and a loop that forms down over a beaded bead for the closure. On the left, it's called Butterfly and Flower. It has the flap down. On the right is a different one with the flap up. They both have fringe chains. They're both herringbone. The butterfly is made in peyote, but the tip of its wings are done in herringbone with spacers added to flare it out. A lot of the purses had a ruffle choker made to match. These are called the waterfall shoulder purse. You know, something I didn't mention, do you remember courants, the card woven big two pictures shown side by side? I didn't mention that was inspired by standing behind a huge waterfall in Arizona. The sunlight was shining through the water as it fell, and it broke the falling water into the spectrum, the color spectrum. That was the most amazing experience, and it has stayed with me. So here I've returned to my waterfall inspiration. I kept to very simple color combination, but the herringbone fans at the bottom and forms the ruffle and adds a beaded bead. So that's pretty straightforward. This is Starburst neck piece 2. It's the second one I did on starbursts. At the time, I was starting to do a lot of beaded beads. This is where I really began to explore herringbone stitch and realized it'll go anywhere. It'll curve. It'll form arches. You can you can expand it and contract it. You can make columns of herringbone that are 1 bead or 10 beads or 20 beads. I kind of felt this was a eureka moment in my beading. The stars are worked onto beaded beads by dividing the beading into 5 equal parts. These are 5 pointed stars, and you're going to see beaded beads. And this is Starburst 1. This was in a bead and button competition. It got a 2nd place years ago. And it's where I first explored the theme. You can see on the left, I did a Stars and Stripes star design, and my beaded beads are pretty dull compared to what I'm seeing people doing now with a lot of relief and texture. I was using the bead to make an image at that time. Butterfly wings. I'm always thinking as I invent a new element, how can I upsize this? How can I make it into a thing that is more than this? But one way is to make it multiples. This was inspired by the monarch migration, and I'm sure Rochelle knows all about that. My son used to collect butterflies. He knew every butterfly, what it ate, what its life cycle was, what its name was. His work and interest in nature has been a huge inspiration for me. He became a biologist and a scientist. So each butterfly here is a little different in some way. I took them apart. I made some bigger than others. And you can see the basic butterfly at the closure. Here is 2 examples of the basic butterfly before I've made it into the grand statement. That last one, by the way, was also in bead and button. Here, herringbone tips are on the left one. And notice on the left one, at the tip of each wing, that round element, I call that around the world. And it's just a strand of beads worked around a big center bead. You're going to see that when we come to ripples. It's the way I start all the corals. So here was where I invented it for a very modest first appearance. On the right is a very simple, sleek butterfly. The chain curves by adding little wedge shapes within the herringbone chain. It's a round chain. I did a huge amount of experimenting, creating different kinds of chains, and you're going to see some coming. This curving is very prophetic of the seahorse, how it was done, and its body was made to curve by making wedges. Here are a few of the chains I've played with. On the left, a box chain that expands as it goes. It twists tight and then more gradually. In the center, I call it Baroque chain with a teardrop pendant, again beaded bead that is, its shape is augmented into a teardrop shape. And there's rounds and donuts. The herringbone chain is a round chain with a center core of beading that is built at the same time as the outer core. And the outer core runs straight and then twists at intervals. On the right is a box chain, which is again herringbone, with spacers in between. The pendant is 2 layers of beading. The top layer allows you to see inside the 2 beautiful beads that are inside. Have any of you been to Venice and seen the Bridge of Sighs? I remember someone telling me that Bridge of Sighs is where the prisoners have their last view of the world. As they cross that bridge, they go from right to left to the prison on the left side. I was very touched by that. I had just been in the church that's right there and seen the encrusted gold surfaces on the altar and everything. And I was thinking, oh my God, talk about a contrast of experiences. They're going to underground dungeons where they never will see the light of day again. It was a very moving concept. And this little beaded caged always makes me think of that. It's got a little herringbone skirt at the bottom. So now we come to the petal shapes. The white piece, number 3, is called Lily. And this is where I discovered expanding into the center of the shape and reducing along the outside after you've got it as wide as you want it. If you reduce 1 bead per row at each end, it comes in very quickly and tends to cup the shape that you've made. So it turns really into a really cupped petal shape. It saw the light of day first when I was experimenting and doing that piece, Lily. The piece to its left is called Cobra, and it's a single petal with a 3-bead peyote drop. And I did that because, well, a cobra is a snake, but each of the sides of that cobra expanding shape starts from a 3-bead chain. The peyote chain is mitered at the corners, so I've picked up on that first bit of mitering I'd learned. And on the left, zigzag lariat, it's called, it zigs and zags by making miters in the peyote chain. The cupped shapes are up the center. On the right is, I call it bud pendant. It's 2 layers of petal joined together with beads stuffed and stitched inside, and it makes a very handsome pendant. The silver shield using Toho's sterling silver beads, now the bugle beads. 2 sizes of bugles make brick stitch wedges for the pendant that reduce down at different speeds, but end up at the same point at one point in time. It's kind of magical. It's 2 layers to give it substantial rigidity and form. Beaded beads are at the corners, and then a herringbone bugle beaded chain is worked onto an internal chain of herringbone. The beaded bead closure repeats the beaded beads down below. This is a necklace of beaded beads and fanning shapes. Nothing special to say about it. It was a big seller though. I sold a lot of these and I taught that workshop. 2 chains intertwine to create the interest in the chain. And the fanning shape has spacers at intervals. Juggler 2 is my first bas relief panel. And this returns to the theme of warrior. Woman has, in order to create, has to juggle so many things in her life. And I think I should rename this Rochelle, because I think the amount of juggling she must do is phenomenal. But
That's pretty funny, Elfleda.
well, it's true. I keep seeing Rochelle at this event, at that event, doing this, doing that. How does she do it all? Well, so this juggler is trying to talk about that. And they're just beaded beads. Forming the figure, I used that paste I showed you at the beginning. And the beaded beads are just wooden beads I've worked over. Beading the bas-relief figure was harder than you might think, because as soon as you start to round a form and you have a design or a pattern that you have to, like the diamond pattern in the legs, that was hell on wheels doing that, I want you to know. And I don't know why it was so hard. It's just because it was curving as I was beading. Herringbone ruffle around the neck. I encourage everyone to have an idea board. In my case, this is a big mannequin that's wearing a black t-shirt all the time. And I pin onto the mannequin the ideas I'm working at the moment, the thoughts I have. It's just a way of letting them sink into your subconscious. And it's amazing how our subconscious is absorbing all the time, because in preparing this talk, I looked back at some of my early works and I saw direct input to Ripples and to Vanishing World. I had no idea. Ideas had come from those early portrait paintings and with water in behind. So realize that your subconscious can work for you. When I'm creating an art piece, I can go get into a zone, especially painting. It's easier because it's rapid. With beading, you're kept on a conscious level because your beading has to be structurally sound. So you can't kind of sink into a subconscious level as easily, or your threads will start showing and you'll screw up your structure. So we have to kind of be like the juggler. We're juggling structure. We're juggling our creative unconscious that's trying to feed us ideas. We're juggling the design. We're trying to repeat what happens over there, over here. So there's a lot of things in your mind as you're beading. So a few years ago, it's as the pandemic was sort of starting, I don't know, everyone got very depressed, including me. And I found my ideas weren't flowing. So I thought, okay, here we go again. I'm going to force myself to do what I used to make my university and art school students do. I would tell them, take a shape, a simple shape, cut out that shape in paper and make 20, 30, 40 of those shapes. See how many different ways you can combine those shapes to make a new shape. To use that shape as a building block. So I decided, okay, I'm going to use for my little exercise an uneven diamond that's shorter at the top than at the bottom. It's all done in herringbone. The top half is single bead herringbone. The lower half is 3 bead and 2 bead herringbone. It doesn't matter. I think in the original ones, the lower half was all 2 bead. So the bottom half was twice as big as the top half. I started making shapes. I had no idea where this was going. And pretty quickly, I came up with those 2 Art Deco kind of shapes in the middle. picture, the two silver ones, by joining sometimes the lower half, sometimes the upper half. And one day when I was playing with this, I had made what I realized was a heart shape by joining to the inner lower halves. The phone rang. I had just made an O in beading for some writing I was making in beading, Bowen Island, the name of our island. On the phone was one of my best friends in the world, her daughter, who looks after conserving the burrowing owl, had just had her first baby. As she was talking to me, I looked on my work board in my lap, and I saw the heart and the O of Bowen. I saw it become an owl. And I thought, oh, I can make an owl from this. I'm going to make Lauren an owl pendant, and it'll be her new mother present. So I made her an owl. I made her mother an owl. And I went on and made owl after owl after owl because it's terribly addictive. This is just the surface of the iceberg, I have to confess. Owls make wonderful earrings, pendants. I really went to town designing chains that carried the owl up into the chain of the necklace different ways. I worked on the expression of the owls. Some of those are very innocent, wide-eyed owls. Some are very fierce-looking owls. This comes back from my portraiture, but I realized, depending on the way you design them and how you place the eyebrow in relation to the eyes, you change the expression. To make the owl, I had to figure out how to bend a herringbone chain that forms the eyebrow, and mitering came in very handy. So now we go back to what the hell? I don't know why this is here, but oh, I know. Sorry, I remember now. The owls, sorry about that. The owls led directly to sea stars, because when I looked at the owl's body, I realized, okay, to make the heart shape, I joined the long part of the diamond. But look at the pinky owls in the bottom center. If you could picture the short top halves being joined instead of the bottom, you know what you get? You get two arms of a sea star that goes right into the center. The lower part of the diamond is simply enlarged and elongated because the columns used there are 3 and 4 beads high, and in the center, from where the legs join into the middle, is just 1 bead high. So sea stars grew precisely out of the experiment I set myself. So it's led directly to my ability to make these undersea creatures, which figures so strongly in my current work. So I've added cubes, large beads, number 8s, but they're mainly made with echoes. This shows once the arms or legs, I never know what to call them, once they're joined, you work the center from the top of the leg into the center. So you're painting yourself into a corner, but because there are stuffing beads being added as you go, it's very forgiving. If your sculpture is needing more stuffing, you just add more beads inside. What isn't so great is if you get down to one bead at the top of each arm and you're still way out. Well, you can always add some extra rows of beading or a very big bead inside. So my sea stars, my sea stars are made with 3 layers of beading: a bottom layer, a middle layer that is stuffing beads sewn in place to the bottom layer only, and then a top layer that doesn't have to be the same as the bottom layer, but it can be. It can even be made a bit bigger to allow it to swell up and have enough room for your stuffing. So now we're going to move on to Vanishing World. If anyone, I don't think we have time for a question right now. Wow. Are we running out of time? Are we okay for time?
You're fine. So far, you've answered everybody's questions in your sentences as you've gone on. So you're doing really, really well in answering their questions.
Okay. So I can keep going. I'm at Vanishing World now. So this is the front view on the left, the back view on the right. I'm going to work through each element I created for this step by step. The spirals were used to make the coral trees that you see at the side of the finished piece. If you look closely, the spirals, the arms actually curve. They're not straight. And it starts from a beaded bead in the center, then an arm is beaded out. And when you make your picot at the tip and then thread back to anchor it to the beaded bead, you break into 2 strands at the very base. And if you look closely, you can actually see that, especially at the middle left. So you go up through 1 strand, come down 3/4 of the way, then make a little branch before you join into the beaded bead. That second branch is a little bit shorter than the first branch, and that causes the arm to curve. Another eureka moment. And this all comes from just playing around. And it happened so fast for me, I couldn't believe it. Sometimes I tell Alan, the beading gods are helping me today, because I don't know where that idea just came from. You see the first sea star in progress in the middle. The parts are being added, stuffing beads are being added. You see barnacles being made and seaweed being made. The fish that I was first going to make 7 fish. It went down to 2 fish very quickly because they each took quite a while. I did a lot of drawings of butterfly fish. Where do you suppose the idea for butterfly fish came from? Came from my son's interest in butterflies, my early beading in butterfly necklaces. So butterfly fish caught my fancy. And I ended up designing my own. He doesn't quite exist in nature, but pretty close. I wanted to make a fish as if it's feeding at a ball coral, which you see top center. It has branches out at the tips, unlike the spirals, which had branches at the inner end of the arms. And that's really the only difference. Here, the stuffing beads have been added to one side before the second layer is stitched over those beads. A bolt starts halfway up. That bolt was laid so that the head was about halfway into the rust-colored large beads. So it would be kind of buried down, and I stitched it in so you wouldn't see it. The bolt had to go out of the fish's mouth through the ball coral and eventually through a brain coral, which I was going to bead. You'll see that all coming. So on the right, you see the coral and the fish have been put together. This Rochelle called the egg cup shape. These are inspired by sand corals, which, and do you know that corals are animals? I thought they were plants. I didn't know what they were. They're animals. I've learned so much doing these pieces. This type of coral buries itself down in the sand and just leaves kind of that flat top showing, which fish think looks pretty innocent. It just looks like pebbles in the sand. And when a fish comes close, that center opens up, forms a vacuum, and sucks the poor fish in. So these sand corals are real little predators. And moreover, they can move. They can suck water in and become jet propelled and kind of hop along the sand. And I have a photo of time sequence shots showing one doing exactly that to escape, get this, a sea star. And sea stars don't move very fast. So it doesn't have to move that fast, but they can move. I find this all fascinating, and I'm learning it all. As I bead something, I feel it's my duty to learn about the creature I'm beading so that I can represent it properly and do it justice. That's all. I feel it wouldn't be right if I didn't learn about it and just beaded it. So these are a variety of ball corals I'm making for the reef. Now, I did a lot of drawings before I started that were thumbnail sketches, kind of proposing how I was going to arrange all these different elements on the reef. And I knew it was going to involve domes, sea stars, all the things you see here, but I wasn't happy with any of my drawings. So every day at the end of beading, I put everything out on a panel and tried different arrangements. And I was feeling great frustration. I wasn't happy with anything. I didn't know how I was going to put it all together and make it work. So I kept soldiering on, making more and more of these elements, thinking, it'll come to me, it'll come to me. And because I want the beading to have input into my work, I often start with a vague idea and allow the idea to finalize as I'm working. I invite the medium to have input. I don't like to see work that looks too planned, that doesn't make use of the medium. I like to see happy accidents. And I think this comes from being a painter for so many years. I had a wonderful painting teacher who used to talk about that too. So I should give him credit. Gordon Smith, if any of you ever hear of his work, beautiful. This is called curly top. It's the goat horn curving, two horns curving around each other became this. Starts from a beaded bead. There's terrific potential for jewelry, I think. So I just call it red curly top. So this it should have been a bit later in the sequence, but this shows you, after making all the bits and pieces, it finally dawned on me, I needed to make a symmetrical arrangement to kind of anchor all these various elements. And it made me think of the roadside memorials that we see people resurrecting at the sight of all the tragic events we're seeing these days. So to me, the tragic event, of course, is the disappearance of life on the reefs, which is very serious. And this is like my roadside memorial to it. It was when I beaded the brain coral in the middle that I realized I don't want a gazillion creatures on top of my brain coral. I want the viewer to be able to see it. I thought it came out much better than I expected, and I wanted you to be able to see it. So I had to make a seabed, which meant tons more beading than I expected. The seabed is a piece of styrofoam cut into a shape that I planned for a bit, painted black before the beading started. Here the brain coral is starting top center, but it was able to start off of the dome, and it could be done flat just in my hand. For all, this is about the extent that it could go flat. I kept adding to the outside and working down, but if I had to start shaping it to fit the dome, so I had to paint the dome black and continue beading on it. It's here that I discovered taking a herringbone line for a walk. Herringbone is 2 beads side by side, you all know that. If you use a large bead on one side and a small bead on the other side, your line is going to curve. Reverse the sides for large and small, it makes the other curve. You can really go to town making curves and forming this sort of positive, negative, concave, convex curves that make up brain coral. The filling of it was a big moment for me too. It's filled in brick stitch using different shapes and sizes of beads because I wanted to keep the fill fairly simple so your eye followed the lines. But I wanted it to be still textured and interesting. So here are the side domes, smaller domes that were not hollow like the large central dome that it was easy to bolt the fish into. Here I had to dig out the center of the dome. And the coral trees are based on gorgonium coral, which looks a little bit like this, not terribly much like it, but enough. And my barnacles and seaweed and baby sea stars are incorporated into the beading around the dome, those small domes. Next, we see the petal shapes reappearing. This is what I call the 5th generation of petal shapes. They were used to build a different type of coral again. These are the 3 sea stars I made specifically for Vanishing World. The tips of their toes could be curled by simply making wedges at the base and having fewer beads in the column on the right than on the left. It would the leg would curve to the right. Very easy and obvious to do. There's the brain coral finished with the fish and their corals anchored in. Here is the seabed all beaded, and I designed it to reflect the spirals of the gorgonium trees. The currents make use of stripes, which really comes all the way from my card weaving, where it's very easy to make stripes. I kind of fell in love with stripes. And So I wanted the stripes to imply the movement of the currents of water. The white areas of water represent bleaching, that the warming of the water only has to be 2 degrees and it kills the coral. For 2 days, 2 degrees higher than normal, the coral dies. It's terrible. And apparently the great coral reef has suffered 5 die-offs, and scientists are telling us we're heading to a major extinction. This is Vanishing World finished. All the bits and pieces added, and you see the symmetrical arrangement. So now we move on to ripples. There's the back with curly tops. One little story. When I was starting the Sea Stars, we were going to be at our cabin at low tide. This is our beach exposed. I thought I'm going to photograph my sea stars on a rock that's usually underwater. And this would have, you know, used to have sea stars all over it. I was putting them all out, and I want you to notice the ramp behind me. That's our next door neighbor to our right. It's not our ramp. Ours is on our left side. Just keep that in mind. I did the photograph, and I got information for seaweed and barnacles and shells and whatnot. We went and sat back up on our patio to have a nice cold one. I turned my head to look at Alan, which meant turning to my right, and I saw what I thought was a huge black dog at the top of the ramp next door that you saw in the last picture. The top of that ramp. As I looked, the huge black dog the size of a Labrador spread its wings, flew down, and circled low over this rock where I had just placed the sea stars. And he must have been watching from a nest at the base of the bay. And I can't believe the vision he must have had to be able to see those sparkly little blingy things I was putting on the rock. And he clearly was coming to steal them. I don't know if it was from the turkey vulture nest or the bald eagle nest, because they both look black at a glance. The turkey vultures have red cheeks. The bald eagles develop their bald heads in adulthood. Could have been either one. So I hope I don't lose my voice. We're moving to ripples. And here we see our seahorse. Now you can see quite clearly the frame around the beading, which was inspired by the fracturing of reflection by the waves of the water. You can see the ripples in the water behind the seahorse. What I really want you to notice, the same blue that's in the seahorse is mixed through pointillism in the blue behind him. And see how that blue water area behind him is softened, it recedes, it's subdued. This is a eureka moment for me, because I realize now through pointillism, by alternating colors within an area, you can create dominant areas and subordinate areas. So you can become very painterly if you want to, although I think of this as still very much beaded inspired. An idea board of things I was thinking of incorporating in one of my work trays. The long top piece is a piece of beaded pointillism using colors I had isolated for the water. It doesn't look very blue, but there is a blue area. But the pink runs through everything, even though I'm going to go back. You don't really see pink in every area, do you? But behind the head, there is equal pink and blue. believe it or not. And by changing the thread color, the sizes of the beads, you can change and alter colors dramatically. Look at the 3 pink corals in the middle. Look below the lower one. You see sort of an antique dark gold area. That is pink and gold, bronze alternating. There's equal number of pink beads in that area as there are bronze, but the thread is black. So I discovered all this nuance possibility in this piece, which for me was a big moment. Now, remember I said around the world, if you put a string of beads around a central bead, all those corals start from variations on that. And I'm going to show you more of that in a minute. So your idea board, I didn't include shells this time. I didn't need it too much. I didn't include sea slugs on the right center. I didn't include the coral that is all lumpy and tangled, which I thought was initially going to be a main part of the piece. I made other kinds of corals. This shows details. See how the limpet, the small cup-shaped limpets around the sea star repeat the spiked arms of the sea star. The structure is actually very similar, but they're different. So there's repetition and variation. If you look at the left of the left-hand slide, left middle, do you see a dark purple shape coming out to the edge just above the middle arm of the sea star? Look how it reflects the head of the seahorse in shape. The S curve on the right of the sea star in the background reflects the S curves in the seahorse. So again and again, I was thinking of repetition from foreground to background. I used ripples to repeat the contours of some of the corals to give you the feel that water is flowing all around, making everything move. It also is a way of reasserting the importance of every single creature in the balance of life under the oceans. They're all interconnected, these creatures. And if one dies off, another is allowed to multiply unchecked and chaos reigns. On the right, you see pink corals, the ruffled coral. I don't think there's anything left that I need to say about that. I start, as I told you already, from little just pencil thumbnail sketches. I sometimes make a list of things I think I'm going to try and convey. It might be ideas, it might be subjects, creatures, individual creatures. It might be textures, it might be a technique I had learned in an earlier piece. I make notes to myself. These might all have a place in this piece. But as I work, I sort of zero in more and more and more on the details. So to start ripples, I knew the seahorse was going to be blinking hard because of all the curves in it. I did a life drawing that I thought was more or less the size I wanted it to be. And I intended to bead directly off of my drawing, looking at it. Using the computer, Alan enlarged it a couple of times up to 110% because I figured I needed to enlarge it probably to be realistic about the fact that I'm going to have size creep. It's going to take more space than I think to accomplish those curves. So I started with the snout with not in bolt, a bolt inside the snout, started halfway down, went out to the end of the snout, then came back and just started the head. And everything was working out really well, doing circular herringbone. I added the stuffing beads as I went, stitching them in place. And actually the shaping went remarkably well. But when I was about halfway down, I was growing increasingly upset about the appearance of the pink areas. I was exploring different threads. This was the beginning of exploring that. And I could see between beads, I wasn't happy with it. But on the back, I was making it with big blue number 8 hex beads. And I thought, you know, if I clean up the back and tighten them up together, I think the back has a better potential than the front. So I made a switch back to front and added, you can see there's no eye there. There's no design on the torso. I kept stuffing it with beads. Here's where I made the big decision. It's not looking too bad, but up close, you can see things. I never want the viewer to see thread in my beading. Here, I'm still thinking maybe I'll use this side. I had an original sea star made with triangular number 11 beads. It makes a bigger sea star, which I needed for the bigger seahorse. I knew I was going to use those types of beads for this sea star. But when I put them together, I felt the shapes don't complement each other well. They're both too spiky, too open. So I changed to a 7-arm sea star to make your eye more aware of the circular exterior of the sea star. So the bottom layer of the sea star has been completed. You can see the uneven diamond shape of each arm as it goes into the center. It's very clear there. Comes straight from the owl experiment. The blue side has now been revised. I reinforced to the left and the right all the existing columns of herring brick stitch, the blue brick stitch, before I cut out a few columns to make that patterned column using the Natio beads. It all worked like a charm. It's the most secure part of the beading, I think. And I added the eye, and I tightened up and did some cleaning up of the back, but it was the right decision to make. The sea star now has many of the stuffing beads added, and I'm starting to make all the top layers for the arms. Here it is finished, and I think that shape of sea star works so much better with the seahorse. And the seahorse is now being put to the right because he faces now to the left. So everything has changed, and all those drawings I showed you were done after I came to this conclusion. I've started making corals. You see the around the world stitch in the bottom. These are the first 2 corals I made. They're quite small. It's very experimental. I really didn't know what the dickens I was doing. I just started in. And for those of you who haven't done brick stitch, at this point, you need to know certain basic things. Brick stitch has to start by attaching into something that's already done. That can be a row of beading of ladder stitch, or it can be the edge of some peyote. It can be anything, but you have to be able to catch into the stitches. So I'm showing at the left, the beginning of a row of ladder stitch. The columns are 2 beads high. You make a circle and then go back through the right-hand side of the circle and make another column to the right. And you keep adding columns until you get your ladder stitch as long as you want it. That's when you start the brick stitch. The thing to notice, and I'm sure the person that's going to be teaching brick stitch will tell you this, to start a brick stitch row, you come up the second bead of the previous row and start 2 columns. You build upward on the left-hand column if you're working to the left, and you build downward on the right-hand column. Then you catch the right-hand column under your first top stitch, go back through that column. Then you come and attach your left column, and Bob's your uncle, you're on your way. You continue your brick stitch to the left. Brick stitch is staggered. So if the second row is going to be either smaller or bigger than your first row, it's not going to be the same. Although you can get it to look almost the same. You can't, it doesn't work naturally to make vertical pieces of brick stitch. It's better if they're expanding or contracting, but there are ways around it. If you want to expand or make it look almost the same as the area below it, you can add, by looping out and around, another column before you move to the left to anchor the left-hand column. So those are some brick stitch basics, and you're about to have a brick stitch workshop, it sounds like, so you'll learn a lot of this. Around the world is how I started the corals in brick stitch. So I made a ring of beads around a big central bead. I'm sure you can figure that out pretty much for yourself. The fan in drawing 4 is how my fan corals begin. I have to use expanding columns, ACO number 11, number 8 as the column rises. And I made them alternate with straight columns of all ACOs. So that enabled the shape to fan outwards. Then I made a row of just number 8s that I expanded at the sides, and then another fanning row. But when I did the second fanning rows, I doubled the number of columns by going not only catching into the top stitch, but catching into each bead as well. And I think you can see that happening in my drawing. So each odd numbered row, rows 1, 3, 5, 7, double the number of columns from the previous row. That's how I was able to make the fans. The limpets, those cupped shapes around the sea stars, that is their favorite food, or one of their favorite foods, is made the same way, but you keep going with your columns all the way around to form a circle. It took me about 22 columns from a 3mm center and an ACO ring to make enough columns to form a limpet. Then you thread through the outer edge of picots and add a spacer in between, and you get these cupped shapes. And I'll show some in my hand, because when you finish shaping them, you have to stuff them with beads and sew a backing on. So you have these little blobs. And Now, a very important thing to note here, when you add any shaped element like a cup or a ruffled coral to a backing, it would be hell on wheels to try to start beading the background directly from the sculptural piece. It's sort of physically impossible. So before they become attached to the board and the beading proceeds outward, there's a step needed, and that's called grafting. So I'm going to show that. I'm just wanting to be sure I haven't missed anything. The frame has already been beaded here, and I've talked a bit about it. It uses mitering at the corners. The backboard is pink styrofoam insulation, 1/2 inch thick. Your needle goes through it really easily at periods if you want another thread attaching the elements to the board as you make it. You can bead directly on the board too if you want to. This shows a final row of ruffling brick stitch being added to the outer edge of a coral, which I originally thought was finished, but I didn't like the lumpy edge, and the ruffling edge improved it tremendously. This is the big white ruffling coral. So I've already described in the drawing how that was made. Then an edging was added with picots and spacers, which was very important. You can see the difference between the left and the right. When you add an edging, it sort of clarifies the movement of the ruffle. Here is grafting beginning. You have to hook into the back of the piece and just build outward from there. So I had to keep increasing rows. You want to keep the grafting flat so it will lay on the flat board, and your background beading works out from the outer edge. But by the time you're beading on the board, you're far away from all the ruffling. So it's much, much easier to work on it. There it shows enough ruffling that now it could be attached to the board and the background beading proceed. Here's the pink coral getting its grafting. Its original grafting is the pink layers that fold out to the front. That was originally going to be grafted behind and be the back grafting. But when I started to look at it and play with it, I realized this could make a really interesting coral by folding it outward. So I had to do another layer of grafting onto the back. So you can see grafting starting. I'm still just pinning. I'm not committing to where things are going to be quite yet. The background around the sea star has had a lot done to it. The limpets, I made a whole bunch of them. I think, I don't know, 7 or 9. And you see there the back of one on the lower left where its backing material is holding stuffing beads inside, and it's all stitched to the edge of the limpet. And you can see that some background beading is being done before I add those onto the board, because trying to bead right next to a cup, you can't do it. It's impossible unless you're holding it in your hand, and you can then bead upside down or whatever you want to do. So here it's all progressed again. Shaping is, arrangement is still being decided, but here's the final arrangement and the final photo. I think I have covered all the things. But now if you have any questions that I haven't, oh, I know what I was going to say about this. I added a plywood backing. I put a felt edging around the edge, stitched it to the whole frame, and it made a very neat finish. And it has a hanging wire at the back. So, Rochelle, I don't know if I've used up my time or if we have time for questions. I leave it to you.
If anybody has any questions, please unmute and ask Elfleda. I know a couple of them that were in the chat got answered. I know that. One question from Ann Baker is, how long did ripples take to make?
It took about between 4 and 5 months. And I worked long days, 8, 10, 12 hours. And I was very committed to trying to do a good job for Rochelle. I was so honored that she asked me to be part of the exhibition. And once I thought of ripples, I thought of pointillism. I thought, you know, I'm really onto something here. I think I can really do something with this that I've never seen done before. So I was very committed to it. And my husband was so supportive and making dinner and taking over a lot of my responsibilities. So I have to give kudos to him. So between 4 and 5, it was about 4.5 months, I think. Any more?
Well, let's see. We have a couple comments. This has been one of the most informative speakers I've ever heard. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
And then we have another question. What was the base that you pinned all the elements to? Is that the pink styrofoam backing?
Yes, it is. And it's you go to Home Depot, they sell all different kinds of styrofoam insulation, big panels like 8 feet long and 3 feet wide, something like that. And they're, the pink one is about 1/2 inch thick, and it's perfect. It's also almost the pink of the in the beading, so it color coordinated beautifully. I didn't have to paint it black, which I like the underlying form to be black, and normally I would have used black thread, but here I used about 6 colors of thread to make best use of the transparent beads. And I have to say, matte transparent beads have so much potential in pointillism because they're chameleon-like. They can change depending on, if you're doing pointillism, what you pair them with. I hope that makes sense to you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We have another comment from Shelley that says, wow, you've had an amazing and beautiful art journey. Thank you for sharing with us.
Thank you so much.
Himley, he says, this was amazing, so detailed and beautiful. Thank you for your talent and your time.
Thank you.
Beth says, I am so inspired that I can't thank you enough.
Well, that's music to my ears.
Everyone
really go away and bead your heart out.
Just so much fun, yeah, I've learned so much. I mean, because everybody kept asking me questions. How does she do it? How does she do it? And I'm like, I'm not sure.
So I'm going to share so that you can see people.
Oh,
there you go.
And so and let's see, and Dodie says, thank you, wonderful presentation and beautiful beadwork. Everybody has just been so impressed and just transformed, you know, because from all the beautiful.
Well, I hope most of you had a good cup of coffee next to you, so you're still awake at the end of all that.
Yeah, my coffee is now empty,
Oh.
but I definitely definitely stayed awake, had no problems with the attention here.
Oh, good.
And so, and Lisa says, I had the pleasure of seeing your Toho Challenge piece in person, all the details from big to small. So impressive.
Thank
Really
you.
enjoyed sharing it here at Bobby Bead and at the shows, and everybody really seeing them in person. It really makes a big impact, that's for sure.
Well, I'm so grateful for the exposure you have given my work.
And
you know, it would have never been seen by any of these people. So thank you for that.
it's well, you've definitely inspired everyone, and so I thank you. And everybody says, yep, I stayed awake. Thank you. Can't wait to try your ideas.
Great.
And so there's a question, did you bead when you painted, or did you pick up beading afterwards along the way?
Good question. I beaded. I only did 2 paintings after I started beading. I felt I wanted to paint my 2 granddaughters, who are so beautiful. I had pretty well stopped painting because most of my painting had been oil painting, and it's very bad for your health. The fumes from the turpentine and from the oil paints are really quite deadly, and I did suffer from it. So I decided I've got to paint my granddaughters, and I debated showing them. I didn't show them, although I was tempted. They were done in acrylic, and that's why many painters have switched from oil painting to acrylics, because acrylics are not, you know, emitting bad fumes. They're bad for your health. But I don't like painting with acrylic. I felt their portraits came out well enough. I've never had a problem with lightness, and but the quality of the painting is better when I use oil paints, because it's gooey and you can work it and smear it around. Acrylics dry right away. You can't kind of play with it. And I'm an organic person. I've said this like 10 times in my talk. I want my beading to have organic movement, and I wanted my painting to be organic. It comes from living by the ocean with all these natural forms all around and the movement of the water. So to me, oil paint, it was oil paint or nothing. So after painting my granddaughters, I gave up painting, which was not easy to do. I may have still one more painting I have to do, which is very personal, but I think I have one left. But yes, I painted and wove before I beaded. The beading grew directly out of the weaving. It's really in a way, it's a textile technique. In my, and yet as I get into beading, it's got all its own qualities. I began it thinking so much of the thread inside the beads. So I saw it as a development of my weaving. But now you start to realize the beads themselves have qualities that don't exist anywhere else. They reflect light, they absorb light, they're transparent, they're matte, they have different shapes, can make different textures. All these things I try to speak with in the beading. So that was a good question.
Any other questions, comments? Everybody just loves your stuff. They saw it at the Bead Bazaar and they think they're amazing.
Thank you.
And so it's
thank you very much.
Many accolades. And so now
well, I hope you find a little speck of inspiration.
Oh, absolutely. I certainly have. And so, yeah. And as Shelley would say, big inspiration.
Good.
So we
Good.
thank you so very much for sharing all your wonderful, I mean, oh my gosh, there's just, I'm gonna have to watch this again and again too. Once again, it will be uploaded to YouTube. So tell your friends, you can watch it again and take more notes. And depending on what you would like, we had a comment about, maybe a class on sea stars, or something. So think about what, I don't know how many hours something would fit into,
A sea star takes me a week.
Oh.
Right, but to teach a class, you wouldn't finish anything in
You wouldn't
class,
have to finish it. No, you wouldn't have
with
to.
that kind of thing, I do think it's interesting that you stuff with beads and you sew in the beads instead of using other types of stuffing. And so I thought that was really unique to create the innards.
With beads, I find it works really well because I can sculpt the stuffing by using big beads, medium-sized and small beads, and placing them exactly where I want them. Whereas the stuffing fiber, I've seen the sea star design that a lot of people are using, or star design, the star structure that is stuffed with stuffing, obviously. They look like little pillows to me, and they're very lovely. But I think of those creatures that crawled on the rocks that were aggressive little animals eating other creatures, being eaten by others. I think of them as a predator and being preyed upon. And I want them to look tough. I don't want them to look like cute little pillows so much. Does that make sense to you?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So my sea stars are tough little guys. That's how I think of them.
That's adorable.
If you saw a video of, have you ever seen the large sea stars that can have 50 legs?
Yes.
They move along the ocean bed like a tank.
Yep. And they eat everything they land on and just
eat everything in sight. And other sea stars are running away, trying to get away from them. I mean, it really is a dog-eat-dog world. That's the reality. And so I'm not trying to turn it into a cute world or a fluffy or a puffy world, if you know what I mean. I want that to be part of it. It's life and death down there. And right now, there's too much dying going on. That's the problem with climate change. So that shows you, we've lived by the ocean so long that we've seen birds diving down and taking sea stars off the bottom, swallowing them whole. Like 100 seagulls diving right in front of our cabin, picking sea stars off the bottom when there was some kind of migration going on. And there they'd come up with the sea star all sticking out of their mouth, and they'd swallow it whole, and you see their neck all sticking out. But somehow they can digest it. Well, now what are they eating? The sea stars are gone.
I don't know.
It's
they move too. They follow the migration of the.
Well, the sea stars dissolved away by a bacterial blossoming from the warring water. They didn't move somewhere else. They're gone. They dissolved in place. They're gone. They say billions upon billions died 5 years ago, and they may never come back the way they used to be. But we see 1 or 2 starting to reappear on the beach, and we're crossing our fingers that over the years they will return. But the die-off could occur again. So anyway, I've become very concerned about climate change and its effect on undersea life, as well as, I mean, the United States has suffered from climate change in California. Every part of the country has suffered from severe climate effects, and we have here too.
And so your work is definitely a statement to bring awareness to that.
Well, I'm glad you say that, because that's what I'm trying to do, is to, it's a double statement. It's a statement about what you can do with beading, but at the same time, it's trying to just expand awareness of this issue of climate change. And you now have a president that's concerned about it. Thank goodness. I won't get into American politics, but there was a lot of denial in the past and nothing, nothing happening. So good, it's happening now.
Well, we'll think positive, and I look forward to seeing everyone's new structural beading projects coming up soon at our next show and tell, right?
Well, I wish I could see them.
Well, a couple times a year we do have show and tell during our meetings. And so that's part of the fun of it. So, and if everybody wants to see, I did finish my sunflower from Hannah Rosner's class. And so I turned it into a barrette, and I'm really having a load of fun with bead embroidery. And so I'm very excited to do more and more and more. So
I've been eyeing that all evening. It looks fabulous. And it's so great on your hair.
And so I'm excited to make more. So it's a lot of fun. But I thank you so much once again for joining us. And we look forward to seeing everyone, hopefully, at our next Let's Bead Live on Saturday, the 21st, with Hannah and her mom, and all about the Toho Challenge. So let's get excited for another challenge.
So thank you. And you're very welcome. Thank you for